A very warm welcome. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. Now, 1 year ago, Russia launched Europe's biggest war since World War II. Russian tanks began rolling into Ukraine. Civilians were sent fleeing for basement bunkers and their country's borders. Governments around the world imposed stringent sanctions on Russia. That attempt, however, has been largely unsuccessful. Unable to pressurize President Vladimir Putin to abandon this war in Ukraine. But against all odds, Ukraine's military has held its ground. It's reclaimed control of broad swaths of occupied territory. In fact, if a November 2022 report by the New York Times is anything to go by, Ukraine has reclaimed 54% of the land back from Russia. Finally, Ukraine has managed to fend off Russian attempts to advance in the east, where fierce battles still continue. But the death and devastation created by this war still remains. The toll of the human suffering has been staggering. Thousands have been killed and more than 8 million Ukrainians fled abroad. This as Ukrainians flee the conflict in their own homeland, and many Russian men have avoided conscription. The World Health Organization has described this situation as the largest movement of people in the European region since the Second World War. And apart from sparking a refugee crisis, economic consequences also continue to reverberate around the world. Be it the scramble for new energy sources in Europe or higher grain prices in Africa, this war's impact has been felt globally. Talk about the grain prices. And Ukraine and Russia are key exporters of wheat, barley, corn, and even cooking oil. Their buyers, African and Middle Eastern countries. But last summer, Turkey and the United Nations brokered a deal to allow Ukrainian grain to pass through Black Sea ports. But reportedly, Russia is still hindering these shipments. Russia is also a major producer of fertilizer and petroleum. Disruptions to the flow of these goods are compounding other supply chain and climate challenges. And that, by the way, is driving up food and gas prices, causing shortage in places such as Chad, Tunisia, and even Sri Lanka. So much so, last year's heat wave curtailed India's wheat production, exacerbating the global shortage caused by the war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the war has also spurred the expansion of NATO. As a result, Finland and Sweden are now pursuing membership after decades of official neutrality. Remember, this is a 21st century war in Europe. It's led by Russia, a nuclear power, and is pushing the world towards realignment. A rattled NATO, the European Union, and even the UN have forced countries to take sides, marking major diplomatic shifts. Let me also give you an example. Turkey is a NATO member, but it has increased trade with Russia since the war began. Now, the country has already objected to allowing Sweden and Finland into the alliance, and that is NATO. Moreover, ties between Russia and China remain solid. This despite the international outcry. So much so, India too has successfully walked the diplomatic tightrope between Russia and the West. Something that was apparent in Thursday's UN vote condemning Russia's invasion. India, China, Iran, and South Africa were among those nations that abstained to vote against this motion. In fact, India continues to buy Russian oil at a discount even as the West shuns this decision. After all, Russia is one of the world's largest producers of oil and fuel. In fact, European countries have banned the Russian oil, gas, and diesel that they relied on. Initially, it caused a steep spike in prices. However, moves by European nations to lock in alternative sources and a freezing winter have largely alleviated those price hikes. Italy and the UK were among nations that bore the brunt of skyrocketing energy prices. But now prices have returned to pre-invasion levels. Let me also tell you about the war's impact on global security, which too has seen a divided world. It should be kept in mind that Russia has more nuclear weapons than any other country. Its attack on Ukraine has re-energized NATO. The US and other member states have funneled tens of billions of dollars worth military equipment into Ukraine. Early weapons deliveries included anti-tank rockets such as the US-made Javelin. In the latest moves, the US, Germany and Britain have already promised to provide state-of-the-art tanks. This even as Iran continues to supply drones to Russia. And countries such as South Africa have recently held joint military exercises along with China and Russia. Ukraine and Russia are emerging from a winter stalemate as this war enters its second year. Will the war end, or will there be a bloodbath on a larger scale in 2023? We don't have the answer yet, but what's clear is that victory for either countries will still have ramifications, whether economic, social, or geopolitical, simply because this war in Ukraine has challenged the existing world order.